Omo a Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Akudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Ten Yerme Chikto Jingi Alu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Ten Yerme Chikto Chingi Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipu Ki Choshimeto Chamare Rabalingashin Nide Gempadi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulwarki Drokun Namdashingla Chöpar Shoyedam Guru Ratna Mandrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupara Shoya Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola penchira sangye drupare shoya sangye chedan tsoge chonamla jancho pardo dani kyapsuchi dagi chushe gibe sonamki penchira sangye drupare sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Laye ke da ludane chenke drubundandami kenandam druwa kuinge dranama che tsampa tamche keto dage che tentam.
Okay. One of the most important aspects of our practice, in general, along the path, in our spiritual practice and also in life, generally speaking, one of the most important aspects is sincerity with ourselves, being sincere with ourselves. The other day we talked about the importance of our ability to be self-aware. And we talk about our own sincerity. It has to do it's also about the self-awareness, the awareness of our motivation. What are the feelings that push us to do something? And our motivation is extremely important. It's what is at the basis of our actions. It's what gives direction to our actions. One of the best metaphors is the one of the bow and arrow, where the action is pulling the arrow and letting go, but the motivation is the direction that I give to the bow. So, and depending on the direction, the result absolutely change. Because because the strength of the action depends on the action itself. So the same action put in a different direction brings a totally different result. So it's not important, it's fundamental for us to direct our motivation well. Direct well what we do, especially when we talk about our spiritual path, when we receive teachings, when we sit down to meditate, when we study the Dharma, when we go to help someone, when we do anything, when we make offerings, regardless of what we do, it's important for us to be sincere with ourselves, be sincere about our motivation. So regardless of how it seems to others, it's not about how other people see us. It's about how we see ourselves. Really, why? What is behind what I do? And with this, first and foremost, it's difficult. I mean, it would be hard for there to be a motivation that's 100% one thing or another. Very often, our motivation, there's a little bit of there's a gray area. I mean, it's not so white, not so black. There's always a little gray zone area. It's hard to have an intention, when we have a prayer or when we do something, for it to be totally altruistic, completely clean. And there's a little bit, but that's okay. It's not because that there's a little bit of selfishness inside that it needs to be completely eliminated. But gradually we clean it. Like, I give an example about myself because I mean, this is quite personal. So I remember once I made a prayer in a very spontaneously it came about, and there was a kind of immediate effect. I was 10 years old. It was my 10th birthday. We were in Kathmandu, and that day we were supposed to leave to the next day we were supposed to leave for Tibet. I'm talking about 2000 in 1991. And then something happened. Our plane was going to be the following day, and a lot of people were commenting that they were afraid of the altitude. The high altitude brings headaches and other kind of problems. And that evening, we were together with Rinpoche in his house in Chabad. At the time, it seemed very big, but now it seems small. Then there was this outside terrace where we would sit down. It was summertime. We were doing the puja there, and I remember that we were doing this practice, and there's a practice of the protector. At the time, I didn't know, and I felt a strong connection, and I prayed so that I said, I don't know what this prayer is or who it's directed to, but I'm asking one thing. I made an actual request. I said, given that we're about to go to Tibet, and I heard that many people get sick there, if someone is to get sick, let it all fall upon me, and I can get sick, and others will be healthy. And it was very sincere. The next day, I woke up sick. We were still in Kathmandu because we had gone to the airport, and then they sent us home because the flight was booked, and we were at this hotel called the Yak and Yeti. One of these it was one of the nicest hotels. This is the nicest hotels of Kathmandu, a historic hotel, and I remember it was really nice, and I wanted to enjoy the hotel, but I remember I couldn't because I was sick, and I had all these symptoms that one would have from altitude sickness. I had a strong headache. I was throwing up. I had all these symptoms of altitude sickness, and even the next day, and the day that we got to Tibet, and there's even a photograph, and he had everyone get off the airplane, and he was the last to leave the airplane. He took me by hand in hand. I was a little bit still dizzy, but as soon as I got to Tibet, I was fine. And since then, I've went back to Tibet many times, and I I was never sick, never nauseous or with headache. But, you know, let's say that that first moment was enough for all the other times. But aside from this small antidote, just observing later, I saw that the power that a request, that a prayer has, you know, when it's pure. Because then when we start having more mental elaborations, when we start with a desire and then okay, but it starts to mix it with other things or elaborate it, and it's no longer like that. Oh, okay. Maybe someone's going to find out about it. I'll see how special I am. If we start mixing it with other things, instead, the more pure our motivation is, the more powerful is our action. This is something that I personally believe in strongly, and and also the more negative our motivation is, the more taken by hate or resentment, then the more negative will the effect be. So we try to look at a correct motivation, something that can pollute our Dharma practice. Or mostly what is called the 8 mundane dharmas. Jikten, Chiki. Jikten means mundane. Ch is dharma, but also means phenomenon. And Gye is 8. So the 8 worldly dharmas or mundane dharmas, these are the 8 worldly dharmas are the practices that we practice in the most excellent way. We don't need to put any effort. Lama Tsongkhapa, it said that he at one point said, to know how to fly, to know how to levitate or fly, or be able to spend hours without breathing or generating inner heat. These things are easy. What's difficult is abandoning. What's difficult is to abandon and overcome the 8 worldly dharmas. And this is one of our principal objectives. So Geshe Larentampa, when he closes up the 8 verses of mind training, he says, through all of this, everything we've talked about, this mind training, the practice of Tonlen, of practicing love and compassion, adapting ourselves to difficult, adverse situations. May I practice all of this without my practice being polluted by the 8 mundane dharmas. What are these 8 mundane or worldly dharmas? The first mundane dharma is being happy when we get our object of desire. Are we able to practice this? Yes. Huh? The second worldly dharma is being unhappy when we don't get our object of desire. We practice this one too. Then we have to be happy when we get a sensory pleasure. We obtain a sensory pleasure, and become unhappy when we have an unpleasant feeling or sensory pleasure, or when we practice this one too, don't we? And then the other 4 is to be happy when we're praised, and we're unhappy when we're criticized. Are we there? Are we following? I mean, we're able to do these too. They're not so hard. And then we're happy. We become happy. One part is criticism, and then another part is when people speak highly of us or speak poorly of us. So when we're put in a positive light, or when people speak ill of us, we're able to do this too. It's like, what, if we're recognized, we're happy. Instead, when we don't get the recognition, or we're seen even as if we're if they attribute characteristics that we don't agree with, that don't categorize us well, we're upset. So the 8 worldly dharmas is about having attachment to objects of desire. We project our happiness onto these material things. We project our happiness on the pleasures of the body, and we project our happiness onto our own image. What people say about us, what they think about us. Are you following? What does it mean that an action is polluted by one of the 8 mundane dharmas or worldly dharmas? I go there and I recite 1,000,000 mantras. I spend hours and hours and hours. But some part, I visualize things well, I do things well, but some part, there's a little voice that says, "What a good practitioner you are." Oh, now I can tell people I've finished my retreat. Where we generate a kind of self gratification. We're not rejoicing because we've done something virtuous, but we are nourishing our identity. This can happen, can't it? This means that virtuous action is polluted by a worldly dharma. As we said before, it's hard for our actions to be completely free from the worldly dharmas. Lama Tsongkhapa says it's easier to learn how to levitate. Once someone went to Lama Ganchen and asked if Rinpoche could teach him how to fly, how to levitate. This was in the United States many, many years ago. Just for information, just to imagine the situation. It was a man, it said that he was really quite heavy. And so he wanted to learn how to levitate from Lama Ganchen. And Rinpoche was very serious. He said, yes, it's possible. It's possible to learn how to levitate. But, with maybe after many, many years of very serious effort and serious practice and effort, maybe you'll be able to levitate a couple meters. Instead, today there are elevators, there are airplanes. So put your energy into developing love and wisdom. So eliminating the 8 worldly dharmas is not something easy, but abandoning them is not easy. But it's something that we need to generate awareness about. We need to be careful. We need to look again and again at our motivation, which doesn't mean that we should stop doing a retreat because there's a little bit of attachment or a lot of attachment to our image. But instead, we should continue our retreat, trying to invert that attitude and not keep that attachment to the image. So maybe I don't tell people that I did a retreat, or I try not to show something. I try to keep that action. What I'm trying to say is that when we see that an action is polluted by an 8 worldly dharma, we shouldn't abandon it completely. But if we see that if we see that a specific action nourishes nourishes an eight worldly dharma and is not just polluted by it, but actually nourishes it, then it's better to avoid. Let's look for other examples of eight worldly dharmas. This is an example that is more probable in a monastery, but little by little, this danger is coming to us too. In the monastery, it happens that there's a puja, there's a ceremony, something like this. And during the puja, food is offered. Even money is offered, sometimes to all monks. If I participate in the practice of the puja, and if I want to do something because someone is sick, they made a request, they asked me to make a request for them, so I go there for there. But I also go there so I can take advantage to have some offering or also something to eat. It's polluted by an eight worldly dharma. Maybe someone doesn't go there for the food or for the offering, then it wouldn't be polluted by it. It would be a pure it would be a pure worldly dharma. But if we want to do something positive, we want to do something positive and fulfill this request. But I also see that I'm using that situation to obtain what I want for myself, physical pleasures or material things. So the action is polluted. Let's give another example. Something that could happen here at the center. I come here to do karma yoga. Karma yoga is a spiritual practice in its essence. It's where I use my body, my knowledge, my actions to put myself at the service of the Dharma and the community, the Sangha, and I offer this. It's something very powerful if it's done with the correct motivation. What can happen is that within this motivation, there's this motivation to do karma yoga, to accumulate merits, purify one's negativities, to grow spiritually, to put oneself at the service of the community, the Sangha. But there's also, okay, I'm going to have the discount here. I won't have to pay this. This can happen. Yes or no? The fact that someone receives something is not the problem. The problem is when, from the side of each person, when the motivation becomes more and more, there's a point where, how do you say? So, it's a point where the scale goes, so instead of being on the side of karma yoga, serving the Dharma, serving the Sangha, and then it goes more and more to the side of, oh, then I'll get this and I won't have to pay for this. And then at a certain point, what happens is that I am there doing that. Why? Oh, because then I have this benefit or that benefit. And so the original motivation, we need to be really careful, because worldly motivations, we're so used to living through them that they're like drops of oil on a cloth. These stains of oil, because the oil starts, expanding outward, and then very quickly it's taken the whole cloth. So we need to be careful also with the relationship with our own motivation, because where we see that we have some kind of a weakness, we need to be careful to not go into certain situations, to not pollute our motivation. I've seen, for example, when I started teaching in Italy many years ago, it was a period where I used to go everywhere. I drove myself and I would go wherever I was asked. I don't know how many thousands of kilometers I did. I would go to Milan and then Turin, at 3 in the morning. I mean, it was constantly just going here and there. And I had a lot fewer responsibilities at the time, of course. But there was a time where I was just traveling so much like this. And one day I realized that I had gone somewhere where I had gone to teach, and they made an offering. The offering that they gave me, it was about 2 or 3 times in that period. I mean, it wasn't enough to cover my gas, and I had this, habit of going wherever I was asked, where I saw need, and I didn't have like a price. People would say, how much it costs? No, it doesn't cost anything. I'd go and give the best of myself. But then this one day, I realized that they gave me an offering that was much less than covering my gas. And inside I saw this dynamic and said, oh, I saw that there was a mind that was starting to work and say, okay, why do you put in so much effort to go there when you can't even cover the costs of gas, instead. And then the mind says, well, then you can go to this other place because that will help you to cover all these other costs. And I remember I was in the car and when I realized that, it felt like a slap in the face to myself. As a stop, enough, because if I let that mind take its space, I saw that my mind was going in one way, and so then I used a tool that really helped me. What I did was that that all the offerings that I received, I put them in a drawer. It's like this today still, and then every 6 months, then I would count what's inside and what I needed. When I needed it, then I would take it. So I'd go somewhere to teach. How much did I receive? I don't know, because then otherwise, very subtle minds start forming. And I saw situations once, for example, in Latin America, in one of our centers founded by Lama Ganchen. It happened that someone went there to teach. It was a monk who's actually is very good in teachings and has already passed. And at the end of the teachings, they brought him an offering. He opens the envelope and he starts counting the money in front of everyone. He said, I'm sorry, this doesn't correspond to the number of people who are present. There were maybe 30 people, and this is, this is only enough for 27. They said, yes, because this person is sick and doesn't have money to pay. And he said, this is not my problem, it's your problem. I should have my complete fee. And there was a huge fight. You can imagine people were shocked. I mean, it was just horrible. What happens is, these are delicate points. I mean, it's normal in all of us. It's normal for us to have expenses. One has a little attachment here, attachment to there, and we're conditioned to have attachment to material things, to being recognized, to being respected. Attachment to our image. We're attached to these things, aren't we? The problem is when we are so attached that even our virtuous actions become polluted by this attachment, and our motivation, little by little, it is diluted, and then we don't even know where our original motivation is. Is this clear? So I gave 2 personal examples because so that each one can think for himself. But when we look in our practice of the Dharma, and specifically in the Lojong practice, where the objective is to go against our selfishness, in mind training, later it says, be careful to not let gods become demons and don't eat poisonous food. So when gods become demons, it's like when our own spiritual practice actually nourishes our selfishness instead of going against it. That's when the gods become demons. Oh, I practice Lojong. I take on myself other people's suffering. Yesterday, just by chance, I saw a video that talked about the different types of narcissists, about narcissism. And there's one type of narcissism. It's called a hidden narcissist. It says the hidden narcissist is that attitude where one says, oh no, I don't want anything, really. I'm doing for others. Where one somehow feels a sense of superiority because they're showing a false humbleness. Because if I need to be humble, I'm feeling I show myself as being humble because I want to be recognized as being so humble. This is false humbleness because I want to feel actually superior to you. This game is very delicate. At a certain point, one can say, oh, I take the suffering of others onto myself. So I let other people know, I've done this prayer for this person who was sick, and and that problem actually even was resolved. I touched the person with my hands, and that person stopped suffering. I'm giving different kinds of examples of things I've heard, but not just that. At a certain point, we start saying, oh, poor people that don't have the Lojong practice, I'm able to see my selfishness, and I do something to change. I'm not like them. If someone starts reasoning like this, feeling superior, then the practice starts nourishing one's own self-cherishing, starts gratifying one's own ego, then that means that we're eating poisonous food. Food is something that should nourish us. And if it's poisonous, it's going to harm us. Our spiritual practice should nourish us. But if it's polluted by our own selfishness, or our ego, it's going to hurt us, harm us. At the beginning, our food is not perfectly healthy. There's a little bit of poison. We need to be careful to not allow it to be very poisonous, as healthy as possible. And this is another reason. This is the reason why this practice was secret. The previous verse said, may I hiddenly accept on myself. I should practice secretly because I want to protect my motivation. Because once I go to someone and say, I take the suffering of others onto myself, as soon as I say this, and someone answers, oh wow, you're so good, I'd never be able to do something like that. The other day I did a meditation and I had such a beautiful experience, and I really felt like that the suffering of others really dissipated, and the joy of others just increased. And there was someone I was practicing Lojong for, and I saw him. He was actually feeling so much better. And then the other person says, "Oh wow! Oh, you know that this person takes the suffering of others onto himself." And gradually, what happens is we sit down to meditate, but on a subtle level, little by little. Why do we want to practice Tonglen? So that we can tell others that we do it, to be he or she who is able to help others. We need to be very, very careful about this. I think this is really clear. I don't need to give other examples. So here where it says, and all of this, may it be free from the pollution of the 8 mundane dharmas. So there's no attachment to material things. There's no attachment to mundane pleasures, to one's image, which is the most difficult to abandon.
I'm speaking in Italian, but there is Ara is doing a simultaneous translation. So we're giving to you the earplugs so where you can listen to the translation also. Thank you. Sarebbe il canale 2. Perciò.
So. One's motivation is not something that should be looked at every once in a while. Instead, it should be looked at every time. It's one of the reasons why we always begin our practices, our meditation practice or teaching. We begin always with, in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we are generating our motivation. We're reminding ourselves why we're doing what we do, why we're there. And in Tibetan, we say kulun chupa, which means we shape our motivation, we direct it, we look at it again, we review it. I invite you all, when you're at the beginning of something, we wake up in the morning, for example, we go to work. Why are we going to work? And someone will say, I go to work because I need to pay my bills. And if I didn't have to pay bills, if I were a millionaire, I wouldn't go to work. I wouldn't do that job. But that's not the question. The question is why am I going to work? Why do I need to earn money? Because if I don't have money, I can't pay my bills. I can't eat. I wouldn't have a safe place to live. I wouldn't be able to take care of my family. I wouldn't be able to secure my person, etc., etc. And as a consequence, I wouldn't even have inner space to practice the Dharma. Because what happens is, if I go into a state where I can't eat well, I have debts to pay, I'm in a state where I don't have my basic needs met, I'm not going to have inner space to practice the Dharma. My mind will be totally taken by my survival. So I go to work. Why? Because that way I can also create the basic necessary conditions to be able to dedicate my life to something meaningful. Because if I can't cover my basic needs, then I wouldn't even have inner space that would allow me to meditate or reflect on the Dharma or anything else. So why do I go to work? I go to work to create the necessary material conditions to have material stability that will allow me a certain level of peace and let me take care of my family, will allow me to dedicate also material resources to things I think are important, but mostly so that I can have inner space that will allow me to dedicate myself to my spiritual practice. So we look at the motivation of why I go and why I go to work, regardless of whether it's monotonous or not. I go to meet someone or see someone. Why? I go to see this person because I like this person. Okay, but what do I want? Oh, I want to try to listen to this person. I want to try to show love. Let's look at our motivation. And even when it's not totally spontaneous, it is possible for us to direct our motivation and regenerate our motivation for what we do. The point that Bernard is talking about with regards to motivation at work, I'll summarize that in addition to creating inner space to practice the Dharma, it's maybe important to look at the motivation of the motivation of my own work, to see. He says that the direction that we as humans is taking is bringing very negative consequences. So we should see how our work impacts society and the environment, how our lifestyle and material lifestyle, how it impacts society and the environment. I totally agree that our lifestyle, which includes also work, but our lifestyle in general, should be looked at. We should check our lifestyle, because our lifestyle doesn't take care of the sustainability of the environment. And yesterday we talked about whales, for example. And we have this idea that when we buy something at the supermarket, that we don't have, and we don't, that we're not involved at all. I buy that product, and I my involvement is just that the actual purchase of the product and my use of the product, and I don't have. And I'm not at all involved in the whole chain of production that has so many effects. This has to do with another aspect. One thing is the motivation of why I go to work, and another aspect, the one that Bernard is reminding us of us, is this awareness of how I work, of this how how I consume products, how I live my life, and how it impacts society. This is something that's extremely important, but in this case is slightly different than the motivation itself as to why I go into something. What I wanted to get to the point where that in anything that we do, it's possible to look closely at our motivation and shape our motivation. It's possible to, how can I say, shape, give a form, give the motivation a form, and it won't. Maybe it's not 100% pure. There's a little bit of attachment to our image. There's a little bit of a little bit of attachment to money or power or some physical pleasure, which is fine in the sense that it's there, fine, but let's insert love and gratitude. Let's insert a virtuous motivation, and gradually we try to increase that part of the motivation and familiarize ourselves more and more with that. That's why it's for this reason that it's said the meaning of something. The meaning of something is like an old person who needs a walking stick to sustain himself, and those are the words. So we, through our words, we generate our motivation. Like our refuge prayer in Buddha Dharma Sangha, I take refuge into enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why do I do this? Because I want to benefit all beings and get positive karma. For example, when this first verse, motivational verse, is recited with a little bit of difference. If you notice, when I say, instead of saying Dagi Jinsok, Gibe Sonangi, at the beginning of the teachings, I say often, it's more correct to say,
Geshe Gibe Sonamgi invece di Dagi Jinsok.
Instead of Jinsok. And maybe someone has realized this, and who's listening when the teaching starts, instead of saying Dagi Jinsok, should say Dagi Chunyun. So the one who teaches should say Dagi Chushe, and who receives should say Dagi Chunyun. What Chushe means to explain the Dharma, Chunyen, to listen to the Dharma. So the translation would be, instead of, the correct translation would be, in Buddha Dharma Sangha, I take refuge into enlightenment with the merits of teaching the Dharma, etc. May through the merits of teaching the Dharma, may I reach the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Or with the merits of listening to the Dharma, may I reach a Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we are directing, this act of teaching, this act of listening. Why? Because I want to reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So when we receive teachings, if you remember, you say Dagi Chunyin, Dagi Chunyin, and the one who teaches Dagi Chushe. So through the power of listening to the Dharma, may I reach a Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. And we can apply this into so many things that we do. So if, for example, there's a time where we need to put more enthusiastic effort into something or practice patience, through the power of the perfection of patience, or we can always apply it to what we're doing. And it becomes important to look at why. Or, for example, we get dressed in the morning, just to say something simple. I mean, why do I get dressed? What's behind how I dress? Someone says, I get dressed because I need to get dressed. Because I need to protect myself from the heat or the cold, or because I need to respect the norms of society. I can't go to work in my pajamas or outside in my pajamas. But why not? Maybe because it wouldn't be respectful. Maybe I'd lose my job. I mean, but in the society where we live, are there common views of what is beautiful, what's respectful? I mean, we have this, don't we? So I go in a certain context, and so I dress accordingly to show respect or affection. So before going out, I get dressed. What am I doing? I'm making an offering to those I'm going to see. I'm going to offer them something more pleasurable to see. It's not that I want to see beautiful, but I want to offer something beautiful to them. Do you see the difference? So I could even say, attribute a certain meaning to the color of the clothes, or the things that I wear. So, like, I wear these clothes so I can remind myself to adorn myself with patience or love. We can give different meanings to our clothes. Or in the morning, just the fact that we wash ourselves. I wash myself because I want to be respectful towards the people that I'll meet. These are small things that, without having to change what we do, but just looking at our motivation and trying to invert a selfish motivation where I do something because I want to seem beautiful, or I don't want people to think badly of me, or I do this because I want to get this, that, or the other. We try instead to invert it. I try to have a pleasurable appearance, to not smell bad. Why? Because that way I want others to feel comfortable. I want others to be happy. I want to offer to others. The action is the same. The motivation is totally different. Simple things. I go to eat. Why do I go to eat? I eat because I like it. Because I don't want to be hungry. Normally, these are the two reasons why we eat, isn't it? We eat because we don't want to be hungry, or because we want to induce some pleasures with the certain tastes. Is that right? Instead, while I eat, I can ask myself, why am I eating? I'm eating because I need to nourish this body through which I can practice the Dharma and be able to put myself at the service of others. I can nourish the beings who live in my body. I can take care of my health, of this body and this precious life that allows me to practice the Dharma, that allows me to walk on a path that makes me of more benefit to others. We invert the why we do things. It is possible to look at our motivation, and in many things that we do with a selfish motivation, it's possible to do the same action with an altruistic motivation, the exact same thing. One can spend a half an hour every morning putting on makeup and preparing oneself for the day, in a selfish way or an altruistic way, depending on the motivation, the inner way, the way that one looks at it inside. We can read our daily actions of every day, everything that we do, we can look at the motivation. And as we look at the motivation, we try to take away this attachment to our image, to our sensory pleasures, and our attachment to things, and try more and more to cultivate love and respect, and our dedication to serve others. And especially when we practice the mind training of Lojong, especially there, we need to look at why we're doing what we do. And looking at the motivation again is extremely powerful, and we need to keep it in mind from beginning to the end of our path, because there are always small, how do you say? They're the cracks. They're little cracks where some other subtle motivation can seep through, and before we know it, it's taken hold of our pure motivation. Please.
Ok. Assolutamente. Ci sono tante
Absolutely, there are many subtleties to this, and we shouldn't be so rigid with ourselves. If we see that our motivation for something is not completely pure, there's an attachment to our image or our presence. I mean, other things that bring us something else. Okay, but there might be positive aspects to that thing. So little by little, we cultivate more the positive aspects, and we let go of our attachment. And at other times, we need to be a little firm. I've given examples in other teachings that talked about other things, but it's appropriate here too. Let's say I get home and I see that I still need to wash the dishes, and I've got a sink full of dishes, and I say, oh, I could wash them, but I don't feel like it. You know, I don't want to, because I'm attached to being comfortable. You know, or maybe I'm waiting for someone to get home and wash them for me. So in this case, what happens? I've just reinforced my laziness, that attachment to my comfort. Instead, if I see that there are dishes to wash and I don't feel like it, it's precisely because I don't want to, then I should do it, because my motivation has nothing to do with the actual dishes. My motivation is about overcoming my laziness. And I can do that by actually washing my dishes. Or maybe my motivation is being kind to someone else. But let's say I get home and I see that there are dishes to wash, and I say, "Oh, here's a good opportunity to show that I take care of things, that I'm better than others, that I can show, how good I am, how nice I am." And so I wash the dishes, I clean up to show that I am this, that, and the other. What's my motivation? It's attachment to my image. And so in that case, it's better to not wash the dishes. So when we see that there are specific actions that are done with the motivation is mostly taken by attachment to our image, it's better to avoid that action altogether. Instead, when we see that the motivation is in that gray area, is a little bit of attachment, but there are also some very good parts of the motivation, then we try to nourish the good parts and abandon the bad parts. But as I said at the beginning, we need to be very careful and have a lot of sincerity with ourselves. Let's go on. So, all of this also should come without letting ourselves be polluted by the 8 mundane dharmas, the 8 worldly preoccupations, worries. And at the same time, we need to do all of this with the awareness that perceives, with the awareness that all phenomena are like an illusion. This awareness that perceives all phenomena like an illusion. What does that mean? To do everything with the awareness that all phenomena are like an illusion. We talked about this yesterday. Let's imagine a moment of anger. Try to think about an object of anger, something that generates anger or aversion in you. Are we able to do that? Yes. Something, you've got something. Okay, and now think also about an object of desire, attachment. I would like to have this. Are we able to think about that? Now, without philosophizing, without analyzing, the object of anger or the object of attachment, are they objects of anger and objects of aversion because they're good and they're bad, or in and of themselves, or because I attribute that value to them? I mean, how do they appear to us, especially in the moment of anger, for example? Obviously, it appears as being, of course, it appears as if it's empty of inherent existence to which we attribute the value of being bad. No. No, how does it appear? It appears as being an object of anger because I'm the victim of the world. It's not that I want to get angry. I get angry because you said this, because he did that. I mean, how did you permit yourself to act like this? How did you, let yourself do this? And this person shouldn't be like this or shouldn't be like that. And here, because this law can't be like this, and this person shouldn't act like this. And you, how is it that you dared say something like this? We can go on and on and on. So what happens when one gets angry? Is one victimizing himself? The attitude? Is it a victimizing? Yes. And even one has a strong desire towards something. I mean, it's maybe the wrong use of the word, but we are also victimizing ourselves because the happiness depends on getting that object. My point is that when we get angry or when we have a strong desire, and the same is for jealousy and fear and envy or any other negative state of mind, at the basis of anger, there's the fact that the object of anger appears to us as if it is an object of anger in an autonomous, objective, and intrinsic way. The object of desire appears to us as if it existed autonomously, independently, like an object of desire, right? Why do I want that thing? Because I attribute a certain meaning to it, or because it's just good? Because it's good. I mean, that's how we see it. Why don't I want that thing? Because it's bad, or because I live that thing as if it were bad? Without philosophizing, our reaction is because it's just bad. Now, let's allow ourselves to analyze a bit without spending too much time on it. I'm going to try to find a quick path. Sometimes there are situations that are very similar that, maybe at one time in one's life one gets angry and other times one doesn't. Or one feels one has certain attractions and then in another time in one's life they don't have them. Or even some things can go from being an object, they can go from being from an object of attraction to an object of aversion and vice versa. And in our craziness, when it's an object of attraction, it's intrinsically attractive, and when it's an object of aversion, it's intrinsically an object of aversion. What I mean to say is at the basis of these feelings, there's the fact that the object exists as it appears, as if it were autonomous, when in reality, it's not like that. What happens is I have my conflicts, I have my own attachments, I have my own idealized image of how things should be or how I wanted them to be. I have my desires, I have my expectations, I have my fears and all the rest. And I live my surrounding reality as if it were at the service of this idealized image that I have. And when things appear as when a situation doesn't correspond to how I think it should appear or should be, we react with aversion, with sadness, with resentment, with fear, etc., etc. But the world that surrounds us and the situations we live are not the cause of our suffering. They are conditions through which we manifest our karmic forces of the past and the mental defilements of the present. So what happens I have my traumas, I have my fears, I have my conflicts, I have my dissatisfaction. So I feel insecure, I feel superior, I feel inferior, I have a strong attachment, whatever it is. Because then what happens is that when I find myself in front of a situation, inevitably, I'm going to live that situation in a pleasurable way or in an unpleasant way. And very often the situation doesn't correspond to expectations, and we feel cheated by reality, by people, because the world isn't the way it should be. Things didn't come about the way I thought they were going to. We're afraid that things go in one way or another, etc., etc. And so what happens is the world that surrounds us is a mirror that reflects our own mental defilements, our own karma, our conflicts, our own reality. Now, without getting into many details, just to summarize, I mean, we've been talking about this for days, and if I allow myself to open up this subject in a more detailed way, we just won't have enough time. And we've talked about this many times already. So if we stop to analyze the situation in front of us, is it the cause of our suffering or not? It's not. But it appears as if it were. It does. And we relate with it as if it were. Okay? So I know that when one is going through a difficult time, saying to oneself, okay, this situation that's happening is not the reason why I'm suffering. It's difficult to one would say, okay, but if this situation weren't happening, I wouldn't be feeling this, or if this person did like this or did like that, I wouldn't be having this suffering now. Yes and no. I have my own theory here. Could be right, like it could be wrong. Let me try to explain it. I think that our life is cyclic. And within our lifetime we have many cycles. And we have also inner processes of certain emotions that we show, certain filters that we apply, certain karmic processes that we activate. So karmic forces of the past that we activate, and so that open up a certain cycle. How do we experience the result of karma? Through our feelings, through sensation. And so my theory is as follows, that in every moment, according to the karmic cycle where we find ourselves, emotional cycles, we have a certain amount of suffering to experience. You change your context, change the situation, add things, take things away. The suffering is more or less that. I've seen people suffer tremendously for long periods, but you change the situation and then the suffering is the same. Also, people who have level of well-being, even if you change the situation dramatically, that well-being and balance remains. So sometimes we have this tendency to impute the cause of our malaise onto the circumstance we find ourselves in. But in my opinion, this is just an illusion. The circumstances have their weight, yes, because the circumstances ripen a certain type of cause or another. But they are not the reason. And often what happens is that we, for some reason, we make it so a karmic force that we have from the past germinates, and it starts to ripen and manifest, and that meets some kind of situation, and if that karmic force has not fully ripened, it's going to manifest itself onto another condition. I hope that it's clear, even though it's not fully, I don't fully express my theory. So the behavior of someone in this present moment or in the past is not the cause of our suffering. It's not that specific circumstance that we're living. All of these things, these are storylines. They're conditions through which we experience our suffering. Yes, I don't mean I'm not taking away the responsibility of everyone's actions, but when I'm living, experiencing a karmic cycle of my own, a karmic karma that is ripening, it's going to meet one condition or another. It's as if I had a kind of container and I put a lot of pressure inside, and then and then and then air comes out somewhere else. Then I block that one up, and then air comes out somewhere else. But the reason why air is coming out is not because of the air. It does come out from the air, but it's because of the pressure. And then if it doesn't go out in one side, it's going to go out in the other. There are, for example, situations that I've seen, people, for example, but no matter what they do, just things go wrong for a certain period of time. I've seen this. I remember once, there's a friend, poor guy. I mean, all the, he was the one whose car would break down when everyone's together, or or we go on a trip and he had the worst car, and his car was the one that got stolen, or if the hotel is out of rooms, of course it's his room. I mean, for years it went, he had this dynamic of being unlucky. And I remember Rinpoche would laugh. He would look at him and laugh and say, "Oh, karma like that," he would say. It's as if one has some kind of karmic cycle, like a karmic force that has manifested, and until it is completely ripened and used up, it's going to continue. Instead, we don't see these aspects. We don't see what happens under the top. I mean, it's like when we look at the ocean, we just see the water. We don't see what's underneath, and we think that reality is just what we're able to see on top. But what is actually happening is the result of an incredibly complex interdependence of which we are not aware of. So what's the illusory aspect? That reality appears to us in an objective way. This object of anger is an object of anger because it's bad. The object of desire is an object of desire because it's good. Reality appears to us as if it were objective, the way it appears to us, and we relate to this reality in this way. Is this clear? But when we analyze, we see that it's much. We can spend all day long saying much more complex. It's not so easy, not so simple. The reality is not at all, but not even close to how it appears to us. And here we have that expression, that poetry at Rinpoche, Nang Yang Tong, where it's written, it appears and yet it's empty. It's empty and yet it's true. It's true. And is still false. It's false, yet it still appears. This is the correct view. This poem, this magic square, also shows us the wrong way to think. It appears, and therefore it's true. It's empty, and so it's false. These are the two erroneous views. If it appears, it is as it appears, and if it doesn't appear, it doesn't exist. It's false. What happens, it's very important for us, is perceiving that, to try to see, try to feel that we're in a dream. The dream is not that reality doesn't exist, that it's false and so it's all an illusion, but it has an illusory aspect where it appears to us as if it were objective, but in reality it's not. First of all, it's subjective. First of all, I am unable to perceive and live anything independently of the filter of myself. The same identical situation, if I didn't have my fears, my insecurities, my traumas, my ignorance, my selfishness, etc., it would be a totally different situation. It depends how we are, how we live a situation. How we live a situation depends on how we are. This is a simple way to understand. None of us is able to see anything independently of the filter of self. But when we take a photograph, no, we don't take pictures like that anymore. No. But when we take a photo, then we look at the picture that we've taken. We believe we believe to see the object in the photo. You know, I took a picture of the mountain. I'm looking at the mountain in the screen. You know what I've photographed. But we don't take into consideration that the image that we see is the image of the object through all the filters that exist. Because if we add the filters, it's different. For example, today on the telephones, you can add many different filters. You know, there are filters that can even change your face, the form of your face, the shape. The other day I saw something. It's crazy because there are filters where you can actually add smiles. There are filters where you can make someone fat or skinny or with a frown, or you can make them younger or older, or you can really, you know, done really well. But if we were aware of how many filters we already have, or we put on, we have crazy filters. There are days where we put on a filter, you know, where we think everyone has a frown on their face. There are days where we put on filters, you know, where we think everyone's looking at us with the eyes of jealousy. But when we see someone, when we look at someone, we put so many filters on, this enormous quantity of filters. There's the filter of sadness, of attachment, the filter of the attachment of our own image or recognition, the filter of self-esteem or low self-esteem. I mean, there's 1,000 different filters. And we perceive every moment through these filters. We even, you know, there are filters, you know, that change a face and, you know, you become dinosaurs. I mean, we're much more creative than these apps. And the crazy thing is, I mean, just imagine you take a picture with all the filters, and you ask yourself, what I'm looking at is the photographed image. No, instead we see it as if it were. And someone might say, well, how can I take off these filters? You can't, but you can choose better filters. Instead of the filter of selfishness, you can put the filter of altruism. Instead of the filter of attachment, you can put the filter of generosity. There's so many different filters that you can add, gradually take away some and add others, but you cannot see reality without filter. That would mean being a Buddha, being an awakened one. I mean, it is possible, but we need a little bit of time. And in the meantime, let's add better filters. So everything that appears to us, if we're able to see it with this awareness that it appears as being objective, but in reality is a mere reflection of my own filters. And as I see you, but in reality, what I'm seeing is my version of you. And if I see you kind and pleasurable and nice, it's because I'm I'm projecting onto you my attachment and desire. If I see you as bad and ugly, etc., I'm projecting onto you my fears, my this other version, etc., etc. Because a Buddha, when he sees a person, he sees it with attraction in the sense that he loves him, but it's not nice or worse off than someone else. But he sees the characteristics of each one, but without putting all these labels. So when I have attraction, I see you through this filter of my attachment. Has it ever happened to have a strong attachment towards a situation, an object, a person, and at a certain point that attachment ends? So gradually we take off that filter and reality changes. Or at a certain point there's a lot of anger, and then we take off that filter of anger and reality changes. So let's remember that everything that we perceive it through our filters. And when we see reality that we don't like, it's because the filters are ugly or bad. Someone might say, okay, but. When we say but, there's sort of something there. Yes, see, but that behavior is not good. No, I don't want to take away the responsibility of anybody's action, but how do I live it? But how I live it depends on my filters. A bodhisattva already at a certain level in front of a situation of aggression or violence or difficulty sees it as an opportunity. Let's go back to the verse, the previous verse, like a treasure that's hard to find. So it depends on the filters through which I perceive and relate with that I relate to with the reality. But we're not aware of this in our daily life. We're not. So when I see you, I think that I'm seeing, I think I'm seeing you, or maybe I think I'm seeing my version of you. No, I think I'm seeing you, when in reality we see our own version of the other. And it's like this with every situation, every place, every object, and even with ourselves. The same thing happens, the objects of attachment and desire. What determines whether an object is an object of attraction or aversion are not the intrinsic characteristics of the object, but the value given to it. Just look back at the experiment of the monkey and the cucumber and the grape. I'm going to repeat it one more time because it really gives the idea clearly. I'm going to give you just the short version. Two monkeys have a task, are given a task. They have a stone that they have to give back and they get a prize. At the beginning, they're given a piece of cucumber, both of them, and they repeat the experiment for more than 50 times. And every time they repeat it, they're happy. The monkeys are happy with the piece of cucumber. They're satisfied. At a certain point, they repeat the experiment. And to one monkey, they give a piece of cucumber, and to the other, they give a grape. They go back to the first monkey who received the cucumber. They redo the task at hand, and his prize is not the grape that the other one received. Instead, he gets, again, a piece of cucumber. This video shows it. It's called the fairness test. It's crazy because the monkey was happy with the cucumber, but when he sees the other with the grape, and then so he takes the cucumber, he throws it down, he stomps the ground. If he could have reached the researcher, probably would have attacked her or him, and then he he takes the stone of the tax and the task and starts banging it, and he doesn't want the cucumber anymore, and he really gets very, very angry. He throws it down. He gets angry. This experiment shows us so many things to reflect upon, but one specific point for me: what determines the value of the cucumber? What determines whether the cucumber is good or bad, if it's enough or not enough? Is it an intrinsic value of the cucumber, or is it the value attributed to it, often on the basis of comparison? Why was the cucumber good before, and at a certain point wasn't enough? Because before it had the value, it was, the comparison between having nothing and having nothing and having the cucumber was enough. Instead, compared to having a grape, the cucumber wasn't enough. But in the end, we don't want the cucumber. We don't want the grape. What we want is an inner satisfaction, an inner sensation of satisfaction. But if I'm satisfied with the cucumber, why do I need the grape? I mean, because what we want is to be well. But what makes us feel good is not the cucumber or the grape. It's the value that we attribute to one or the other. But we're not aware of this mechanism and for this reality. And I mean, these objects of desire and envy and jealousy, attachment, aversion, all these objects, the situations, people, they all appear to us as being objective, autonomous, independent, as if they were in and of themselves objects of attachment or aversion or jealousy, as if they were objective causes of our happiness or our suffering. And if I get angry, it's because the world is disgusting. If we stop to analyze instead, it's not like that. So, Geshe Rinpoche tells us we need to follow our path of practice with the awareness that we live in an illusory reality, that reality appears to us as being of intrinsic existence, but it's not like that. We perceive everything through the filter of ourselves. This is, for me, one of the best analogies. When we're tired, we perceive through the filter of tiredness. When we're nervous, we have the filter of nervousness. When we're joyous, we perceive through the filter of joy. Oh, isn't it like that? It's like this. Except that we can't be without a filter. We're not able to be without a filter, given how we are. One day, when we become a Buddha, it's another story. But now we have these filters, so many filters, and it's an important step is being aware that we have this filter, that what I see is a reflection, is what I see through this filter, and it's useless to victimize ourselves and say that it's the fault of the world, or to blame this, that, and the other. What we need to do is gradually take our difficulties, see the way we are, and direct ourselves, where we want to go, remembering that these are all mirrors of what we have inside. I know it's difficult, and in some cases it seems almost cruel to say something like that. For example, a person who lives a situation, maybe someone who is being abused, or situations that are very, very difficult, I'm not at all taking away the responsibility of one's actions. But anything we live it through this filter of self. For example, certain situations of abuse, situations of violence, etc., lived in different cultural situations. I mean, are they lived in the same way or lived differently? They're lived differently. It doesn't mean, one is positive and one is negative, but it's different. There are certain things that, maybe one lives it with a certain normalcy and doesn't suffer mentally, and or the opposite. So we live through the filter of our world view and the experiences we've lived so far. So let's remember that that our reality around us is illusory. It appears as being objective when in reality it's subjective. And in this subjectivity, it's not subjective on for our technical discernment, but it's subjective, when it's related to the information that we've received of our DNA. These genetic aspects our experiences, our culture, what we've learned. There's an infinite number of aspects that make it subjective. I mean, it's hard. What can I do? Sometimes I can move away or get closer to an objective, but our objective in these days has been to change our filter, to not cultivate anger and resentment. And we can do this by going beyond this self-challenging mind that nourishes and sustains the attachment and jealousy and fear and anger and hate. And in this way, may I break free from my bondage of ignorance, my bondage of selfishness. May I break free from my bondage without any clinging. Because, let's tell the truth. Are we attached to our own selfishness? I mean, we're enormously attached to being right, to the identity of ourselves that we have. We have an enormous attachment. We cling to, to how we take care of ourselves. It's, I'm fine like this. We're attached to our ego. In some cases, some are even attached to their own suffering. I don't know how, but it's possible. I've seen situations where someone suffers in front of a certain situation, at a certain point realizes that in reality doesn't feel like he needs to suffer anymore. But if I stop suffering, that means that I suffered in vain. So it's better if I just keep suffering. But if I stop suffering, it means that I'm giving the victory to the other. I mean, to me, something similar happened. Once when I came to live in Italy, and it was through a situation, it was a little bit, without getting into details, it was a little bit difficult. Maybe if I ever find it beneficial, I will explain it. But in any case, I came from the monastery in India on vacation, and for various reasons, I'm not going to get into details. I wasn't able to go back. It was quite a conflictual situation, and in that moment, for me, it was very heavy. First of all, I have my sense of what I think is right and what's wrong. I thought, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't. My position was, I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna go, and more or less I said I'm gonna go back, and I'll stay there until they physically remove me, like kick me out. And Rinpoche said to me, "You're free to do what you want, but know that if you force this situation, you'll get sick." And and then he said, and you know, and then more or less what he said is, and then the day that you have cancer, don't come to me asking for help. And it wasn't even that influenced me the most. I saw all the conflicts that it was generating, and then one day I decided, okay, I'm not going to go back to India. I'm going to stay here. And in this choice of mine to stay here, there was a time that meant letting go of something that was extremely important to me. I had projected many, many years of my life onto a path. I was living a life that I loved in so many ways. And at a certain point, I had to say, okay, I'm not there anymore, for a big conflict, and in my point of view, I was really like a victim of this situation, of a situation of strong, how can I say? Can't think of the word. It's strong. I was being discriminated against strongly. In any case, in front of all this, I took the decision, okay, I'm not going back. I call India, I talk to my masters, as I say, for this, that, and the other. If you agree, I'm not coming back to live. And they said, we are so sorry, but we agree. That day, I'm just not well, and I start crying. And I think I cried for almost the whole night. And at a certain point, I realized that I was crying more out of conditioning than out of actual feeling, almost as if, how can I not be sad given what's going on? And then I stopped for a second and I said, pause, okay. I looked at myself from outside and I thought, well, actually, I'm quite fine. I wasn't feeling bad, but how could I allow myself to not suffer given the situation I found myself in? So I was almost convincing myself that I needed to suffer and be down. Then there was a moment that was spontaneous and strong, but then I saw that it was more of a kind of a position that I was taking to show to myself and to the universe that it wasn't correct what was happening, that they were wrong, and so I was expressing my suffering as a way to declare that. And when I realized that, I said, okay, stop being so silly. And the next day, I never felt like that again. I said, enough. But I realized that there was a strong attachment to that state of suffering, because that state of suffering was what allowed me to show that I was a victim of the world. It's what to show that the others were wrong, and that the situation that I was living wasn't right. And so it reinforced my perception of things like that. But when I was able to let go of that, let go of the attachment of that, it was a huge relief. And today I'm deeply grateful to everything that life has brought me, that I've had to face. And if I hadn't lived that situation, I wouldn't have learned many things. And I wouldn't have had many other positive experiences. And following year, I went to Tibet, and I was able to meet my master, so many marvelous things that came after that. But I saw that attachment to suffering is this attachment to being right, this attachment to, I'm a victim and I want to maintain this position of being the victim. And sometimes we just need to let go. Sometimes we need to allow ourselves to be happy even in front of a bad world. Oh, but this one did this one said that, this happened, that happened, but this isn't the way I want, this isn't, okay, but I still allow myself to be happy. Okay, just send them all off, but I'm going to be happy. I don't know if this concept is clear. I allow myself to be okay, to be happy, without attachment to this state of suffering or of wanting to be right or reinforce this idea that one's a victim of the world. At a certain point, one just allows himself to let go and let go of our own selfishness and free ourselves of this suffering. So, with the mind that is free of the 8 worldly dharmas, with an inner state, a mind that is not polluted by the 8 mundane dharmas, worldly dharmas, and at the same time perceives all phenomenon as illusory, that is aware that everything I perceive comes through the filter of self, without attachment, without clinging to selfishness itself, without attachment to suffering, may I break free from my bondage, the bondage of samsara, the bondage of samsara. May I be free of this cycle of suffering, of this samsara. I think this is very clear. So, I'm really happy that we could look at this text together, taking our time, because there are many points, many things that the mind training, these 8 verses of mind training take us. I mean, we could spend months talking about some of them, but now I'd like to read it once again before concluding, and I'd like to ask all of you to take this text like guidelines for your life. It's not a text. It's a lifestyle. It's a tool. It's a method to direct ourselves towards this so-called path of enlightenment. And as we said yesterday, let's allow ourselves to dream, to want to be a bodhisattva, to enter into this path and say, I want to live situations with love and respect, without anger and jealousy. I want to be happy. I want to be able to dedicate myself to others. Try to fall in love with the way of the bodhisattva. Fall in love with being a bodhisattva, and then put energy in that direction. And the verses are meant to remind us of this process. Let's remember that in life we are training constantly. Sometimes we train more in anger, sometimes in envy or ignorance, and often in selfishness. We need to train in something else. Try to train in something else, and we can do it. Let's remember that we can all do it. The only reason, sincerely, why I find myself here is because I believe that it's possible. If I didn't think that it was possible, I wouldn't dedicate my life to this. There was just one time for sure, and another time more or less, where I said to myself, but I've never asked to manage a Dharma center. why why am I finding myself in this situation? Why is it up to me to manage a Dharma center and be um, a reference point for this whole community? I mean, you know, you know, you know, you know, the more we are, the percentage of those who aren't well increases. And one day someone's angry, the next day someone's jealous, and then yes, yesterday this one exploded, the day before that one exploded, in the sense that we're in samsara, and each one has his own samsara. I mean, it's just the way we are. But I asked myself, why? Rinpoche, I asked. To simply, I want to practice the Dharma. I never asked since if there's something that I loved in the monastery of India, that I would follow. I wasn't responsible for anything. I needed to simply follow the rules, go to teachings, serve. And I asked myself, why? Why build all of this? Why build a temple? And the only answer that I found that convinces me is because I have faith in each one of you. I have a deep faith that each one of us can really walk along the path of Dharma that Buddha transmitted us. I believe that each one of us can use the tools of the Dharma and can really overcome his own conflicts and gradually develop more love, more stability, follow this path, grow, become bodhisattvas, and walk along this path. I believe really that this is possible. And all of this, everything that we do is to serve this, is at the service. I mean, why are we building this temple? Why are we taking care of this center? Why do we do all of this? Managing a center and keeping it afoot is something I don't wish on anyone. Every once in a while, I've met people who have wanted to open up Dharma centers, even to make money. Oh, that doesn't work. Why am I saying all this? Why do we do all of this? To create conditions to be at the service of the inner development of each one. Because I sincerely believe in each one of you and also in myself. I believe that it's possible to develop more love towards oneself, that it's possible gradually to open up our hearts and overcome our own selfishness, have a view that's more consistent with reality, and find more states of peace and balance. It takes time, and as we've been doing this work of the temple, I would always say that this temple needs to stay here for at least 1,500 years, because we need to have time also to live and to die and be reborn, and so the temple needs to be here for us. It's not something immediate, and we're all here for this with all sincerity. If I didn't believe that you had the ability to listen, understand, assimilate, and practice, and receive, and gradually realize, what I've tried to share with you, then, it would be much easier to take nice walks in the mountains and enjoy my life in silence. But instead, I believe it's possible, and that's why we're here. That's why in these days what I try to do is to share with you in the best way possible. How can I say? Just bringing to you the giving you the secrets, the most difficult part, to simplify, put it in a way that you could really take the essence and take the best from these teachings. And so my request to you is that you believe in yourself, because we can all make it, and we're doing it. We are doing it when we walk in the right direction. Maybe not in how we thought, or in the right in the amount of time we thought, but I ask you to believe in yourself. We're going to read the text one more time. As I said, I'll look at the translations again in Italian and English, but now let's read the translations that we have. May I always cherish all limited beings by considering how far superior they are to wish-granting gems for actualizing the supreme aim. Whenever I come into anyone's company, may I regard myself less than everyone else and put myself at their service, and from the depths of my heart cherish others more highly than I do myself. May I consider others as supreme. Whatever I'm doing, may I check the flow of my mind, and the moment that conceptions or disturbing emotions arise, since they debilitate myself and others, may I confront and avert them with forceful means. Whenever I see beings instinctively cruel, overpowered by negativities and serious problems, may I cherish them, may I take care of them as if they were difficult to find, like discovering a treasure of gems. When others, out of envy, treat me unfairly, with scolding, insults, and more, may I accept the loss upon myself and offer the victory to others. Even if someone whom I have helped and in whom I harbor great expectations were to harm me completely unfairly, may I view him or her as a hallowed teacher. In short, may I offer to all my mothers, both actually and indirectly, whatever will benefit and bring them joy, and may I hiddenly accept on myself all my mother's troubles and woes, their sufferings. Through a mind untarnished by the 8 worldly dharmas, and with all of this, the mind that that knows all phenomenon as an illusion, may I break free from my bondage without any clinging.
Kyewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheke pela longche ching sadan lamge yende rabzone dorje change koban yurtoba sho chanchuba simcho rimpoche make panama ke gyureche kepa nyambra mepa yang kongne konto pelware shun.
May the precious mind of bodhichitta that has not yet arisen arise and grow. May that which has already arisen not degenerate and grow forevermore.
Arise and grow, which has born, have no decline and increase forevermore. Imo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin Ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke jinge lop kuncho sumke ngodrubutsol kuncho sumke trashishon.
At dawn or at dusk or at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Semcho Sutra. Che lam tudro, lam la parche, miyomar shom.
May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free of interferences.
May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free from interferences. Mi me tserwe ter chen chere sang ang trakpe shabla asolwade.
Thank you, everyone. In this way, we conclude these days together, and at the end of the year, we will pick up the Lojong teachings with the 7-point mind training, and on a practical level, that I'd like to just remind everyone that we have a small Christmas market near the restaurant, and so if someone has not yet been, please, if you'd like to go by, it will be kept until this coming weekend. Thank you to everyone.